have a question. What do you do? What do you do when you don't know what to do? What do you do? What do you do when you're wondering what to do with your kid's education, for example? And maybe the security concerns of these days are worrying you, maybe the moral compromises you might see in your school system, or whatever the concerns. What do you do when you don't know what to do about your kid's education? Or what do you do when you finish your education, you're a recent graduate, and the sky is the limit, the world is at your hands, and you have no idea what to do with it? What do you do? What do you do when your job just isn't the job for you anymore? You can't stand it, or you can't stand the travel or the commute, but you need it because you've got debt and bills and you're not sure what to do. What do you do when you're in charge and you don't know what to do? What do you do when you have to care for people that you love? People in your own home, parents, kids, parenting. What do you do when you don't know what to do? Right? It's a question we ask. It's certainly a question we feel often. And the trick is, or the crux is, often what we do initially as a reaction or response isn't the most helpful. We go to worry, we go to fear. Maybe we're paralyzed with fear. Maybe we ask this person, hey, what would you do? Oh, yeah, that sounds good. And then we hear from somebody else, oh, well, that sounds good. And then you Google it, well, that sounds good. What do you do when you don't know what to do? Often the things we first do aren't any good for us. Well, David asked this question. Actually, I think David felt this question often in his life. And he taught about it. Well, I should say he sang about it in Psalm 131. We're not alone in the struggle. King David knew that question deeply. What do you do when you don't know what to do? And he answers it in Psalm 131, and that's what we'll look at this morning together. But first, he begins his psalm by saying what he doesn't do when he doesn't know what to do. Let's look at that first. He says in the beginning, Lord, my heart is not proud. My eyes are not haughty. You can find it in your Bible, Psalm 131. It's a little 3-verse psalm. You can almost memorize it by the time I'm done this morning. He says first, Lord, my heart is not proud. My eyes are not haughty. So he knows that often our first inkling when we don't know what to do is to go to pride or let pride take over in our conscience. And so he says internally, Lord, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to let my heart become proud. In other words, I'm not going to think that I'm all that I can handle this problem, that I know how to get to the bottom of this concern. No, my heart is not proud, Lord. And he continues and says, my eyes are not haughty. In other words, I'm not going to pretend to know in front of everybody else who's looking that I know what to do. I'm not going to act like, yeah, I got this. Hey, everybody, all your concerns, yeah, I can solve them. Just line up and I'll take your questions. Yeah, right. He's not going to pretend that he's got everything figured out so that everybody looking at him says, wow, David, wow, what a smart, wise man. Boy, nothing phases you. He says, I'm not going to pride. I'm not going to pretense. That's not my way when I don't know what to do. That's kind of what we do when we're trying to impress other people, right? We let pride and pretense, especially when we don't know what to do, our initial reaction will be to kind of pretend our way through it. That's what you do on a first date, right? Or that's what you do at a high school reunion. That's what you do at a corporate dinner. You pretend to be more than you are, or to have more than you have, or to know more than you know. You pretend. And David says, when I don't know what to do, I don't do that. Recently, I went to a physical therapist for these nagging injuries that I've had that just weren't going away. Some were running related, some whatever, woke up with, and like months later, they were still there. And so I caved in and I went to a physical therapist. I went because I didn't know how to solve these problems that I was experiencing. But when I got there and he's poking and prodding and asking, does this hurt? How's this feel? I found myself minimizing the pain. Like, oh, that's not that bad, and kind of excusing it away. The stuff that had driven me there, now I was pretending wasn't so big. I was proud. I was pretending. When I didn't know what to do, put on the spot, I was trying to pretend I knew what to do. But David doesn't do that, he says in Psalm 131, verse 1. He goes on and he says, another human tendency when you don't know what to do is to pursue that issue more. He continues in the second half of verse 1. He says, I don't concern myself with matters too great or too awesome for me to grasp. I don't concern myself with matters too great or too awesome for me to grasp. In other words, he's saying, Lord, these issues are coming faster and going farther and deeper than I ever could. So I'm not going to chase after them. The word concern here is really just the word go. It's translated concern, but it really almost everywhere else means go. So David is literally saying, when these issues are pressing down on me, I'm not going to go after them. I'm not going there, Lord. I'm not just going to find out more information and ask this person and do this search on my own. That's not going to be my first response. I'm not going there. I'm not going to pursue these concerns more. Now, what were David's great and awesome matters that he was concerned with? Well, they'd be many. Just think with me about David's life, if you know some of his life from the Bible, from 1 Samuel and the book in 1 Chronicles. David grew up as one of 8 sons. He's kind of forgotten, left in the fields, maybe neglected, isolated. David knew what it was like to have difficult family dynamics. You ever been there? You ever wonder what to do when when you seem kind of overlooked or when you're overlooking others? David knew that. I wonder if he wondered, what do I do, Lord? What do I do as the youngest and the forgotten? And then David in his preteen years God sent a messenger, and the messenger told David, hey, you are going to be the next king of Israel. 15 years would go by until he became that king. What do you do when for 15 years you're waiting and you don't know when the end is coming or when you're beginning, when your destiny is going to take over? What do you do for 15 years? Oh, and by the way, David is working for the king whose throne he's going to have someday. And that king is trying to kill him, even though David is basically like a music therapist for that king, right? So what do you do when your authorities, when your boss, when people over you are mistreating you, but you're obligated to work for them and you want to submit, you don't want to run away, or you don't want to mistreat them? What do? He felt it deeply. Later on in David's life, he would lose a child, but it didn't come as a surprise. God warned him, you're going to lose this child. What do you do when you know something dark is coming your way and all you can do is just let time bring you closer? What do you do? What do you do with that kind of loss, that kind of pain? And then, of course, David would become king. And he'd follow the reign of this man, Saul, who didn't leave the kingdom in such great order. What do you do when you're in charge, when the eyes of seemingly the world are on you, and you don't know what to do? David felt it. Maybe David wrote Psalm 131 at the end of his life, and he's wondering what his kingdom is going to look like when he's gone. He's wondering what his family is going to do. Maybe you're there. You wonder about retirement, about how your family is going to be cared for, how your business is going to run when you're gone. And that day is coming, and so you wonder, what do I do, Lord? Well, David knew those questions, but he said, I'm not going to let pride swell up. I'm not going to pretend that I know what to do. And I'm not just going to pursue those issues more. No. He tells us what he does. And it's in verse 2. Instead of meeting his concerns with pride, with pretense, or pursuit of more information, when he didn't know what to do, David ran to God. And he says this beautiful, beautiful little metaphor in verse 2. Instead, David says, I've calmed and quieted myself, like a weaned child who no longer cries for its mother's milk. Yeah, like a weaned child is my soul within me. From the overwhelming feelings and thoughts he alludes to in verse 1 and how he doesn't respond to them, he comes to this soft, tender, peaceful calm. And he says, I'm like a weaned child. My soul's like a weaned child. You can almost hear him sigh as he lets some of these concerns go. Now, children were weaned in the ancient Near East at age 2 or 3, sometimes as late as 4 or 5. So we're talking about very capable little human beings. I have a 2-year-old now. We've had 4 2-year-olds. And I can promise you that 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, toddlers are very capable little human beings. especially when it comes to eating. They don't need help eating. Many a morning we come in and there's our toddler in a sea of cereal across the kitchen floor. She has no trouble eating. She doesn't need mommy anymore when it comes to eating until she gets hurt, right? Then she doesn't necessarily need mommy, but she wants mommy. You've seen a toddler running enthusiastically and falls and trips and skins her knee, and then it's just a puddle of tears and sobs and wailing. And what does mommy do? Mommy goes and scoops up that wailing child and slaps a Band-Aid right on the knee? No. You don't solve the problem first. When your toddler's huffing and puffing and wailing and flailing, you pick him up and hold him, and the breaths get a little deeper and a little fuller until you hear that last little right? You've seen that. And the toddler has its mommy, and all is well. David says, my concerned, my distressed soul, I take that soul and I carry it to God, who just wraps it up and calms me and quiets me. He's talking about God as the Father. God as the perfect parent who knows you, who knows your concerns better than you do. He's seen them coming from eternity past. And he says, would you bring them to me? Would you take your whole soul, the whole package, take your whole being to me? And can I just be with you first? Before we get to tackling these problems, would you come to me? See, the deepest questions, the most concerning matters that we have in our life aren't going to be answered by a what type answer. No. They need a who type answer. They don't need some solution. They need someone. And God says, I'm that one. I'm the who for your what do I do questions. And notice David says in verse 2 that his soul is like the wean's child. He says, I have calmed, I have quieted my soul. He's indicating that there is some choice to be made when you don't know what to do. You can do a lot of things. You have a choice to do all of them. And he says, better than becoming proud, better than pretending that you've got it all handled, better also than just caving into fear and being paralyzed by fear. Better than pursuing the issues themselves more, you have a choice to take your restless soul to God, who can calm and quiet you like no one else, like no solution, material solution ever could. That's the kind of God David knew, the kind of God David was with, the God who's the who when you're asking, what do I do? So when you don't know what to do, David is saying, you can do that. Just be with the Lord. But you and I are the greatest obstacles to overcome when we feel overcome, are we not? Our pride, our pretending to handle things, our pursuing what's really unpursuable. When we don't know what to do, we need to get out of our own way and go to God. And by going to God, David, by the way, is not belittling his problems. They're still great. He's not just wishing them away. They're still there. He's not neglecting leadership. I think one of the hardest tasks of leadership is to remain calm, to choose calm when everybody else is going crazy. Now, David is putting his problems, his concerns in perspective. And that's a very wise thing to do. Even if you don't go to the Lord, even if you don't trust in the Lord, it's a wise thing to gain perspective, to realize how small you are and how big the world is, and I'd say how big God is. It can put your problems in perspective. So if you're snuggled up next to the Father of your soul, your weighty problems don't feel so heavy anymore. What's over your head is way under his feet. So how do you do this? Let me suggest a few ways, and then let's see what David does. Let's see what he exhorts in the end of Psalm 131. I'd suggest asking yourself a couple questions when there's these deep concerns in your life, when you don't know what to do. Ask yourself, who or what am I trusting in right now? Am I trusting in me? Am I trusting in other people? Am I trusting in the internet? Am I trusting in God? And maybe a better question is, who is my companion, or what is my companion right now? In other words, what am I allowing to be closest to my soul, to my mind these days? Is it my problems and issues? Or is it the Lord? There's a choice to make, remember. Who's my companion these days? Become the companion of God, not of your problems. Let the Lord be closest to you. And in that attitude, or in that mental conversation you might have, what am I allowing to be close to me? What am I concerning myself with? I'd challenge you to just kind of whisper what you could call a breath prayer. Just a short little phrase that kind of recalibrates you to be with the Lord. For me, it's, God, you got this. I say that phrase in my mind all the time. God, you got this. God, you got it. God, you got them. God, you got me. God, you got this circumstance. God, you got this. Just something short and sweet that recalibrates your mind and makes you the companion of God and God the companion of you, right? Just a short little breath prayer. And then maybe, for a few of you, you might want to do this, because this is the more difficult one. Write all your concerns, all your worries, all your fears, everything that feels like it's pressing down on you and crushing you. Write them all out. Journal them, bullet points, whatever. Write them all out. And on that paper, as a confession to God, say, Lord, I've been trusting in these things more than you. I've been trusting in me to solve these things, or in others to solve these things more than you. These things have been my companion, not you. And then as an act, as a postural act of confession to the Lord, if I were you, I'd get down on my knees, take all those things that I've written out, all my concerns, and say, God, these things are pressing down on me. They are crushing me. They're over my head, but they're under your feet, Lord. And trust those things, trust your soul to God. But let's see what David does. He wraps up his little song this way, verse 3. Oh, Israel. Can you hear him just kind of breathe in? Oh, Israel. Worried, terrified, distressed Israel. Hope in the Lord. Now, always, Israel, hope in the Lord. I can kind of hear him making this, not this command, but an invitation. Right? I see David, he's front and center. He's the king of a nation who's struggling, who's got some enemies on their borders threatening them, who's got concerns, daily concerns. What are we going to eat? What are we going to farm? All those concerns. And all eyes are on David. David, solve our problems. You're the king now. David, bail us out. David, do something. Come on, you're the leader. You're God's anointed. You're God's elect. Do something. David, do something. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? David says, I don't know what to do, but I know this. I'll go to the one who does. And before we get into solutions and problem solving, I'll go and just be with him. And so there's David in the calming presence of God, in this distressed nation, looking at him, and he says, Israel, hold up. Come on over here. Come be with God. He's not commanding them, saying, you should go to God. He's saying, I'm already there. God's presence is so sweet. This is exactly what I need. Would you come join me? And he writes this little song so that they wouldn't forget that. He actually leads them to worship the Lord in God's presence. Again, he's not pushing them and sending them out. He's saying, this is great. Come be with your Father. Come be with the one who knows you and owns you. It's an invitation. And he says, hope in the Lord. Hope really has this idea, this meaning of waiting. Waiting. Lingering in God's presence. Not rushing in, okay, God, what are you going to do? How are we going to tackle this problem? Let's get this stuff done. Just being with God. He himself is the answer before he gives you the answers. And David knows that. And he's telling his countrymen, his worried family, his worried servants, be with this one. Be with this one. Worship this one. So when you don't know what to do, turn the music on. Engage with the Lord in worship. You might be in a spot right now where the weight of the things you're facing is staggering. You wouldn't even know where to begin to talk about, let alone solve the stuff that you're facing, that your family's facing, that people you love are facing, and you just plain don't know what to do. Do you go to God? Do you wait in him and with him, hoping in him? Or what? The renowned and late physicist and atheist Stephen Hawking said, he contributed to this discussion, and he said, here's what you could do. However bad life may seem, Hawking says, however bad life may seem, there's always something you can do and succeed at. While there's life, there's hope. It's a brilliant man, and I mean him no disrespect. He said, however bad life may seem, there's always something you can do and succeed at. If you're still alive, well, there's still hope. Really? In other words, when you don't know what to do, when things are really bad, just try harder. Well, just try something different. Just take a different approach. Really? Like you haven't done that already? And oh, well, if they haven't crushed you yet, if your problems haven't killed you yet, well, then you can still hope. If you came up to me when I was consumed with worry or I didn't know what to do and you said, just try harder. Hey, they haven't killed you yet. No thanks, right? I don't want you around. So again, no disrespect, but that is not comforting. That is not hopeful. I think a different solution and a better one is to run to God, who knows you, who is far above the stuff that's pressing and crushing you. I kind of picture it like this. If let's say somehow you fall off, you're on a yachting trip, right? All the yachters, you fall off a boat, you're in the middle of the ocean. No person, no vessel, no land around you. You're in the middle of the ocean, no life jacket. That's what it feels like sometimes when you don't know what to do, right? Is swimming going to help? No. You'll just die really tired. Your concerns won't go away, but you will. So don't just try harder. Go to the one who knows you and loves you.